Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Robin Toombs. He's the co-founder and CEO of Yoti. Robin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kevin.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Yoti is actually really, really innovative and cool. And selfishly, I've actually been looking for something like this for myself for a number of years because I hate carrying around a bunch of cards and passports and a bunch of stuff. But before we get into all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Okay, well, I was born in London.
Okay.
And I went to school in London here in the UK.
What did you take and why?
Okay, so I guess my favorite subject at school was economics.
Okay.
Always been interested in current affairs and business and how economics kind of works and, shapes the world. And so I did that at school and also did it down at university, along with a bit of, I wasn't great at footy, but liked playing. But
Okay.
Economics was the main kind of study for me.
Got you. Okay, very cool. So you get out of university. Walk me through your career, maybe some career highlights along the way, up until what you're doing now, because you've done a ton of stuff.
Okay, well, so yeah, actually the first thing I did when I walked out of university was I went and actually taught in a primary school in South Africa, in a rural area, and did that for about 6 months, actually. Really interesting, out in a very rural area. Lots of the kids used to have to walk a long way to get to the school, and it was all kind of, literally 6-year-olds up to 17-year-olds all in the same primary school until you passed your primary school exam. You stayed in that school, and, if you were busy working as a 15, 16-year-old, black, guy, then it was really difficult to pass your exams because you were busy working half of the week. So that was quite an eye-opener for me, but I really enjoyed it. And then I came back and thought I've got to get a kind of job. I went and applied to a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was an accounting firm, and they gave me a pretty good grasp of how finance works and how some of the big businesses that they used to audit and advise kind of worked, and that was interesting. But I always had a kind of desire to do my own kind of thing. I wasn't sure whether I had all of the skills I needed to be an entrepreneur, but I was always keen to think that I'd like to work for a business that I was part and owner in, rather than just work for somebody else. And luckily enough, met a very talented person when I was, 27, 28. So this was going back to 1997. And we started doing some web business together.
Okay, very cool. So you do that for a while. Walk us through the rest of your journey up until what you guys are doing at Yoti, and how did that come to be?
Okay, so I joined my co-founder Noel, who actually is also one of my two co-founders of Yoti. Joined him in 1997.
Okay.
So I left PwC, much to their surprise. I'd just made manager and said that I was going to go off and work with a guy who was working out of the room of other hairdressers in Wimbledon, an area of London. And yes, they thought that was very odd. And 6 months later, I was completely broke, along with Noel, working in this startup doing web development. And we kind of recognized that, yikes, this is really, really difficult. We're up against lots and lots of people who are also pitching for beers, and they're saying that they can knock up a website for, a few $100s, and we're trying to do it properly for 3 or 4 times that price.
Sure.
But it's very difficult to convince people back in 1997 that's genuinely, a different quality of site that you're offering. So
Sure.
that made it very tough for us. And we, literally, I remember the last time my bank card worked, before that went back into the hole in the wall, and I was left with no money to withdraw. So that was pretty tough. My girlfriend, now my wife, fortunately used to lend me about £5. That's about $7 or $8 a day to kind of get to work and buy some chips at lunch and stuff. So that was a bit of a sobering time for me and Noel, and certainly focused our attention on trying to make sure we started making a better success of the business.
Okay.
So we started developing some of our own games in that business, so actually developing some of our own intellectual property. And those games started to become, quite popular. So this is early days in the web. Lots of people started playing some of our quiz games and other kind of arcade games. Okay. And because of that, we basically, our business was bought, or, an offer was made on our business. Very and cool. We decided to accept those terms, and we worked for that business for a period of time, not very long, but long enough to kind of work out that we wanted to do our own business again, and that we would like to do it in the online bingo sector. So we knew that quite a few of the businesses who were wanting to advertise on our free-to-play games were online gambling businesses. Okay. And that market actually looked pretty saturated back even in 1999, 2000. There were a lot of online casinos, in countries. And we thought, well, not very smart to just add another casino. What we'll do is we'll create an online bingo site, because in Britain, bingo is very popular with, mainly the female audience, and nobody was offering that. And we thought we could make it quite social for the player. And
very early on.
So what we did was, so what we did is we created that site. So we left the business that had bought us, and we started a company called Gamesys, and Gamesys has now become a very big, popular business. But what we did, which was quite unique, was we let lots and lots of people play our bingo games, but during the games, we also had a chat kind of facility. So way back in kind of 1999, 2000, we were letting people chat on our games. And then we would also have breaks where we would then have a chat host play some games with the players. So they might, ask one of the players to draw a car literally with their mouse, and that would appear on screen. And then the other players would have to guess what it was. And the first person to guess would, get a round of applause and, some well dones, and also maybe a couple more bingo cards. And to be honest, it was very clear to us that actually you could make the web a very social place. If you go into an online bingo hall in the UK, Kevin, you'll find that nobody speaks during the game, because they have to mark the card off. As the numbers are called out, you've really got to be focused on marking your card, because your numbers are being called. Sure. Otherwise, you won't get to bingo. Whereas online, you can get the computer to mark your card, which allows you to have more time to spend focusing on saying hello to your friends, meeting new friends, having a good chat. And that became incredibly popular here in the UK. And, Gamesys became a very successful business. And we actually understood back in 2001 when we started that business that, online identity was a problem. So obviously we had to check that people were over 18 to play our games. And the normal way to do that is to enter your name, your date of birth, and address, so that the business can then check that off to a third-party database, so like an Equifax or a LexisNexis. But what we very quickly worked out was, just because somebody puts a name, date of birth, and address in a website,
Sure.
It does not necessarily mean that that's who is at the computer. It just means that they know that information, and a fraudster may well deliberately use somebody else's genuine information
Sure.
to make sure that when you do the check will kind of match against the database. And
Right.
therefore you have a false illusion that you have, Robin Toombs on your site, when actually it's a fraudster pretending to be Robin Toombs. And it's very difficult to stop that. So we always knew one day that, somebody's going to have to fix that on the web.
Okay.
But back in 2001, we were pretty busy doing our online bingo, and we just kept watching each kind of year. And, after about 10 years, we thought, it's still a real problem on the web. And,
Sure.
it's obviously a difficult problem. Otherwise, somebody would have solved it by
Yep.
now. And, that led eventually to us deciding to create Yoti.
Okay. So I think you just kind of briefly covered it, but what exactly is Yoti? And walk us through actually deciding to build the thing, and how is it kind of grown over the last few years? Because obviously version 1 probably looks quite different than what you have today. Or is that fair to say?
Sure. Yeah, it definitely is. So as I say, for 10, 12 years, we always thought that online identity system doesn't work at all well,
Sure.
apart from if you're a fraudster. And in 2014, very early in the year, I had one of my co-founders, Duncan Francis.
Okay.
I'd invested in a business of his. Noel and I had invested in his event management software business. So he was doing some really clever stuff with a company called Spartan Race. So if you don't know Spartan Race, they're the guys who basically you go to usually a very nice setting anywhere around the world, and you do a kind of 5,000 meter run.
Sure.
And you might actually have some obstacles in the race, and you might literally jump through a little bit of fire. You might go through a little bit of mud, climb a bit of a climbing wall, and it's just a much more fun social kind of event. And it's out in the open air, and particularly in America where it's nice and sunny, it's a really good time. But what we noticed was that there was a really, really big queue at the start of the day. You've got literally 10,000 people on the run. And they all drive into, a nice kind of mountain, lake, and they park up, and then everybody queues, and they queue for registration. They queue effectively to sign their injury waiver forms. And to do that, the site, for insurance purposes, has to make sure that the person signing the injury waiver form is genuinely that person. So they basically ask you to bring your passport or your driving license or your state ID. And they then watch you sign. Then they look at the national, driving license or the state driving license, and they check your face, check your signature, and then say, thanks very much. You can go and queue in the bag drop now. So that's your last queue. Luckily in the sun, where I was out in Temecula, in California, it was nice and sunny, and I thought, okay, well, those queues need to be fixed, but at least it's sunny. I went to watch the same kind of event a couple of months later here in London, just south of London, and it was raining and pretty cold. And that was a fairly miserable first start to the day for a lot of the people. They still enjoyed the actual run, but a lot of the spectators waiting for them and whatever, it was just not a fun experience. So Duncan and I came away from those two events and said, we really should try and crack this online identity space. Nobody seems to be doing it yet very well. And, we looked at the technology and thought, well, smartphones, it's kind of February 2014. So smartphones are getting increasingly popular, lower cost. The cameras are getting better. The biometrics are getting better. They're not there yet in terms of face recognition, but they're clearly getting better at that. And then we were very lucky. My brother actually saw on the passport office's website here in the UK for literally about 1 week in February 2014. They issued a little blog which said, you might be interested to know that you can read the chip in a passport using an Android phone. So my
Oh,
brother
interesting.
passed that to me, and I said, that's really kind of interesting. I thought you could only do that at the border, probably with
Sure.
some special cryptography keys to kind of do that. But
Sure.
actually, we looked into it, and it is a ICAO standard, so kind of an international standard, and you can't read all of the passport information, but you can critically read in the chip the biographic information, so your name, your date of birth, your nationality, and you can also read or capture the picture. And obviously, you need the consent of the passport owner to do this, because they would
Sure.
need to do it with their Android phone. But it made us think, hang on, we've got all of the possible ingredients here to create a consumer digital identity if people, think that that's a really useful, thing to have. And therefore, we thought, let's go out and speak to some people and see how they might want to use digital ID and whether they would want to actually own a digital ID.
Very cool. So there's a unique story around the name. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so, it's a consumer app, and we always thought it's very important for us to, ensure that we do this as a consumer application. So what I mean by that is, if you go today to a lot of websites, they may well have asked you to fill in a form, or they may ask you to basically, scan a driving license, or, take a picture of your face and then scan a document. And the companies who are supplying that technology, it's what we call a business to business, kind of service. So they're effectively supplying technology to a brand, and the customer is engaging with the brand and may not be aware that the actual technology to do that piece of the onboarding is supplied by another business. And we kind of thought, well, that doesn't really, interest us as a business model, because as we spoke to more and more people, they mainly said to us, look, ideally, I'd like to own my identity online. I'd like to obviously make sure it's really secure so that nobody else can use it. And I really want it to be my own identity. And that gave us the kind of, thinking for the brand name. So actually, Yoti does stand for your own trusted identity. But we were very keen not to have a kind of English worded brand, because we wanted Yoti to be a global brand, and we wanted people in Asia and Africa and all around the world to kind of not think that this was, coming out of one particular country, whether it be England or the States or Canada or wherever.
Sure.
We wanted them to think, no, this is a nice, easy name to say, and it doesn't sound definitely as if it's coming from one country. And nice and international. And, so a lot of people said to us, well, we really want our own passports. The analogy I always give to people is that, if you've got your own passport, you want to go to as many countries as possible where they accept your passport. And the more countries that do so, the easier life is. If I have to go and get a visa before I go on my travels, it's a pain. I've got to disclose lots of info, and I've got to go back and pick it all up, and it's very particular to that country. It doesn't help me get into any other countries. It's just a really bad way of doing it. And that's the analogy I give for how we get into websites, that each website tells me exactly what I've got to fill in, and it's useless to use anywhere else. And then obviously Facebook, Connect came along, and that's a good idea in terms of, okay, I can now get into, lots of sites with just one, kind of username and password. But, in the passport analogy, you really want to have one digital identity, and you want lots of businesses to accept that. Obviously, they need to really trust that it is a good level of identification to make sure it really is Robin Toombs who's interacting with them. But if you can do that, then you've got a really efficient way for businesses to accept me, and for me to easily give them what they need without giving them copies of my passports every time and giving them my passport number and expiry date. I don't really want lots of websites to have my photo ID inside their databases. Hackers are pretty good at getting into
Sure.
databases and taking those crown jewels away with them to do bad things.
Sure. So let's maybe dive a little bit deeper into that security side of thing that you just mentioned, because how do you guys handle it to make sure people don't get access to my data?
That's a really good question, and it took us a long time to think through. So we started, as I say, with lots and lots of people saying to us, ideally we would own our identity,
Yeah,
and it would be, you know, private. We
Sure.
wouldn't be kind of tracked, and
Okay.
it would be completely secure. Now, those are all very nice ideals, but
Sure.
when you actually take them away and work out, well, could I do that? So it's taken us 2 or 3 years of technical team and time to kind of go through how to design a system which meets all of those ideals, but actually is also practical to build and practical to use. And I think the key technical bits to the Yoti system are that when you basically create your Yoti, and you do that by effectively using your face, so you basically enter a mobile phone number into Yoti, so you download the app, you enter your phone number, you then enter a 5-digit PIN, and you do that twice to make sure it is, you know, the correct PIN that you're putting in.
Sure.
And then you basically do a liveness video, and you just say 3 random words to us to make sure that we can see your face and see you're saying these words that you wouldn't otherwise know that you needed to say.
Okay.
That gives us confidence that it really is you in front of your phone. And then you can add your photo ID. And your photo ID is either your passport or your state ID. So, for instance, in America, we'll check the state ID or the driving license to the American motor vehicles database to make sure it's a valid ID. And once we've done that, we basically issue a key effectively onto your phone. It's the kind of secure area of your phone. And we do not keep a copy of that key. And that's highly unusual, because effectively what it means is that we have no key to get into your data. So if you put your photo ID into Yoti, we don't keep a key. Even if it might be helpful for you one day if you lost your phone, we don't keep a spare key. And that's crucial, because we don't want anybody in Yoti or anybody else in the world getting into your data.
Sure.
But it's obviously a massive issue. Most people wouldn't do that because people lose their phones.
Right.
And if the key's only on your phone, then you can't ever let that person back into their account. And that normally would be, you know, pretty drastic. So we had to work out, how do we basically make sure that we don't let hackers in to your account by only putting that key on your phone? But if you lose your phone, how do we make sure that you can get back into your account? Because you might have had your Yoti for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and there might be quite a lot of valuable things on there, and you don't want to have to create a new account if you lose your phone. So we had to work that one through. It doesn't sound, as I explain it to you now, as if it should have taken as long as it took us to work out, but actually it is quite complicated to get through to where we got to. So we effectively give you also a recovery file.
Okay.
And you choose to basically download the recovery file. It's just the click of a button into your iCloud account or your Google Drive, depending on whether you've got an iPhone or an Android phone.
Gotcha.
And that recovery file, hopefully you never need it again in life. But if you lose your phone or you buy a new phone, you can then download the app again, and you can hit the recovery account button rather than the create new account. And then it will say, well, we'd like permission to get to see whether you have a recovery file on your iCloud or Google Drive account. And if you allow us to have a look for that, we can find that recovery file. Now, that recovery file doesn't allow you into any account, but it does allow us to then ask you to give us, a liveness test. So you have your face again and your photo ID, and we then check those 2 things against one account in the database, because the recovery file only points at one account. And as long as it really is you and it's your unique photo ID. You can only put photo ID on one account in Yoti. You can't share photo IDs, obviously, across accounts. Then you can get back into your account. And if you haven't kept a recovery file, you'll never get back into that account. You'll have to create a new Yoti and effectively have your document released from your old Yoti by proving that you still own your document and your face, obviously.
Sure.
And then we'll release your old photo ID so that you can put it on a new account. That was a painful amount of time to work out how to do that, and also make it relatively easy for people to kind of do.
Yeah, I think the thing that people don't realize is the easier software is for the user, there's a huge amount of work that goes in from design and development to make it easier for the user. Where if you have a terrible user experience, it was usually a lot quicker to build.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's always frustratingly I'm a user as much as anyone, and you always, as a user on a phone, want a nice, easy experience. But if you want really, really good security, making it very secure and making it very easy, and not having to try and explain too much of why you're doing X and Y, either to make sure the fraudster doesn't know what you're doing, or to not bamboozle the user with too much kind of technical explanation. That's a really hard balance to get right. And if you get it too wrong, nobody will use your app. And if you kind of get it not overly secure, because nothing should be overly secure, but if you kind of make it too complicated, then nobody will use the app either. So, very difficult commercially to strike that balance. And I think that's why ID's been one of the too hard to do things that people have kind of put off until later. And then the last bit, Kevin, of that technology, which I think is really important, is that when you basically do put your photo ID onto Yoti, every one of those, what we call attributes, so your given name, your last name, your date of birth, your nationality, your passport number, whatever it is, every one of those is individually encrypted. And then these keys to each one of those attributes, they're assigned different keys.
Okay.
And you get a copy of the keys basically onto your phone.
Okay.
And then effectively, if you want to ever get into your attributes, you've got to use your phone and your biometrics on your phone to unlock just your attributes. And you can choose which ones you want to unlock once you're into your account. But if we ever gave our databases to a professional hacker or a state doing that type of thing, they would, after a long time, they would de-encrypt the information. But with Yoti, they wouldn't get any value whatsoever, because they would spend years unencrypting the data. And then we would go, okay, we've got the name Robin, we've got a date of birth from somebody, we've got a nationality, but none of this is linked. And the only way you can link it is to go off and find people, find out whether they might have Yoti on their phones. That's not very easy. You need to go and ask them, do you use Yoti? And if they say yes, then you need to steal their phone, hopefully without them seeing. And then you need to hack into their phone, get into the encrypted area, unencrypt the keys, and then use their biometrics, and then get in to do things. And that clearly isn't what a hacker would like to do. That's an expensive, high-risk thing to do. What hackers want to do is get into one database with one key and get into 500 million Marriott details at once, which is why that doesn't go down well.
No, and to be honest, it's probably easier just to actually steal your physical passport at that point than trying to go through that whole process you just outlined.
Yeah. So of course it's made it difficult for us, because effectively once you're on Yoti, Kevin, if you have a Yoti, after we've checked that you match your face to your photo ID, after that you're completely dark to us, because we kind of worked out that, look, that's the safest way. If we don't have keys, we don't know who anyone is, we can kind of we can understand groups of people. So we can understand that there might be a lot of UK mobile phone number people using Yoti, but we don't know who is using Yoti. And if you, Kevin, wanted to share your name with a insurance company and give them comfort that it's been verified to your driving license, we would know that a name has been transferred by somebody to that insurance company, and we would, charge them a small fee for that beneficial verified information.
Gotcha.
But we wouldn't know it was Kevin. So we can't track you. We can't exploit your data and sell it on to lots of people without your knowledge. The only person who chooses ever to use their data in Yoti is you, if you want to. And if you don't want to, nobody else is ever going to use it.
No, that's interesting. That was going to be my next question to you. You just touched on it, is how do you guys monetize the platform?
So yeah, the monetization. So going back to our online bingo business, we kind of thought, that's really intriguing. We're sending a lot of names, dates of birth, and addresses to people. We're paying them a fee to match that against the electoral roll or the voter registration information or the driving license database or whatever it might be. So obviously you pay a fee for that, and quite often you get a match in some countries, and quite often you don't get a match. There might be misspellings in the web form, or the actual database might have a misspelling in it. So you get a whole load of what we call mismatches. Well, you still pay for mismatches. We learned very quickly that, this is intriguing. We've got to pay regardless of whether they match or mismatch. And, it's quite expensive. And if we can deliver a system which gives you 100% confidence, so anybody obviously transferring information with Yoti, you're definitely not going to get a mismatch. You're definitely getting Robin Toombs, verified to passport, name coming across because the person's using Yoti to do it. And that's really good for the business. And we charge less than competitors who basically charge for checking against databases. Instead, we say we don't need to charge too much because, for instance, you, Kevin, have done half of the work or 3/4 of the work of onboarding. Our software can handle scaling as more and more people come into the system, and therefore we don't need to charge businesses very much per time that they do it. And we only charge once. If you need to sign up to an insurance company, you share your verified details, and if you then return just to log in with multi-factor authentication, well, you don't have to share your details again. You're just sharing that one kind of special encrypted password effectively between your Yoti and that insurance company. And you don't actually have to remember what the password is. It's a cryptographic identifier just for that insurance company and your Yoti. And if you go to another site, it's a completely different cryptographic identifier. So it's a nice secure system. You don't have to remember passwords. We charge small fees, and the business is happy and the consumer's happy.
No, it makes total sense. So I'm curious to dive a little bit deeper into how's the industry changing, because I think in a lot of cases, Apple with Apple Pay and Google with Google Pay really started opening people's eyes to putting some of the stuff that they would never put in their phone, basically mainstream. I think a lot of people, like tech people or maybe nerds, which I would put myself in that category, were doing it or wanted to do it. But I think nowadays it's become a lot more mainstream. So how have you seen the industry change, and what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a big change that's happened in the last few years. The confidence for people to believe that there are some brands who are able to give them high utility but are trustworthy to basically put some very precious information, your credit card, into a phone with confidence that hopefully the tokenization solution, which then allows that information to allow you to pay at different sites without necessarily those sites having to actually then keep a copy of your credit card in their systems, which obviously is vulnerable to hacking, is a big change. And I think that's what we're going to see in our particular part of the industry. So in ID, a lot of it has been about putting in lots and lots of knowledge. And, if you really want high identification in the last few years, you've had to put a lot of knowledge into the system.
Right.
And you've had to answer lots of questions to make sure it's likely to be you, under the assumption that only you hopefully should know all of the info about, what your passport number is, what your driving license expiry date is, all of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But there's been so much hacking in the last few years that actually most of that information is kind of out there now. So, just two examples from me. So, Equifax, lost 143 million records, 18 months ago or so. And, so my information will have been in there. And, I use Marriott as a hotel, and, they lost hundreds of millions of records as well. So I can never get that data back in a way. I can't kind of, capture it all again, make sure that it's not out on the dark web and nobody's ever using my name. I'm clearly not going to change my name because, that's going to get hacked later.
Sure.
So changing names is not going to work. Changing passport numbers would probably help, but, it's expensive to change your passport. So the only way I'm ever really going to be able to solve that, and I think this is the trend, which is not that well understood today, but it's increasingly becoming clear that this will be the way that it works, is I'm going to have to basically get myself a digital identity, and I'm going to have to reclaim this information tied to my biometrics on my unique phone, which I keep pretty preciously on my person, 24 hours a day.
Sure.
And, at that point, it then actually becomes quite difficult for fraudsters, because the websites which are too casual and, don't want any friction, they'll continue to let the fraudster put my details in because they found them on the dark web.
Sure.
But any of the businesses who go, well, that really isn't very clever, we should accept the digital IDs as long as we think they're good, credible ones and they haven't been hacked themselves. And those ones which are robust and secure, that's going to become very valuable both to the consumer who owns that digital identity and also to the businesses, because the business will be able to look and go, well, look, that person shared their name and their date of birth, and they've been on Yoti for 5 years because they also shared that evidence that they've been on Yoti for 5 years. Well, it's highly unlikely that they're a fraudster if they've shared their real name tied to their passport and they've been on the system for 5 years and they've done lots of transactions. So it's a very, very different way of how you prove ID online, and it's going to become by far the easiest way to do it and the hardest way for a hacker to try and do it in your place, because they've got to get your passport, and if your passport's already on the system, that passport won't be allowed on another Yoti. So, my advice, get your passport, get onto Yoti, make sure nobody else, tries to pretend to be you on Yoti. But they would have to match your face, obviously. So, don't worry, you haven't got to rush out today and definitely sign up.
Sure. So have you guys had any pushback from companies using Yoti to actually identify people, or how has the reception been from enterprise?
Yeah, so I think, clearly anybody who's trying to do a platform solution has a massive challenge of,
Sure.
Firstly, do you have the capability to develop the technology effectively, competitively and securely? And I think over the last 3-4 years, after a lot of hard work, we have a team of about 250 people here at Yoti,
Oh, wow.
mainly based in London. We have solved most of that, technical work. It's taken a long time, but we have. What then becomes the even bigger challenge is what we call the chicken and egg, which is the network challenge. So all of the Yoti users would like hundreds and thousands of businesses to already accept Yoti, to do the quick 2 to 4 hour integration and accept Yotis. Of course, all the businesses quite rightly want to see lots and lots of Yotis already before they bother to do that 2 to 4 hour integration. So, solving that chicken and egg is difficult. We now have 3.8 million people who've installed Yoti. So last month we we had about 300,000 people install Yoti last month. It's growing each month. And in the developed world, so, leading countries in the developed world for us are the US
Okay.
and the UK. We had about 75,000 people install in the US and about
Wow.
55,000 people install in the UK. In the less developed world, we had about 70,000 people install
Interesting.
in India. That's our leading country there.
Sure.
And what's really interesting is that about 2/3 of the people in March in the developed world who installed Yoti came through what we call organic. So that
Interesting.
really means that they came through either a business recognizing Yoti and letting somebody use it and showing that on their website,
Sure.
or through word of mouth, somebody using Yoti and then telling somebody else about it or emailing them about it. And then about 1/3 of those developed world installs were us going out onto Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, quite a few other places, Google, and marketing the service to people who haven't heard about it before or need to see that marketing message several times before they begin to kind of register and think, it might make sense to get one. And as we go forward, we obviously have to, persuade more businesses that we are going to be one of the trusted identities and that they should therefore integrate. But also we just need to keep on, reassuring individuals that, you can get lots of utility with a Yoti. So one of the most important things we did early on was we created our own password manager. So like a LastPass or a Dashlane product, so that you don't have to remember your passwords. You store them securely in Yoti, and then you can go to any website which accepts username and password, and then basically use Yoti to transfer that information to log in. And that gives you instant utility before we have to go out and persuade businesses to get into Yoti. But over time, we need to obviously win the really big trusted anchor kind of businesses, which would give lots more people utility and confidence. So you clearly want your big supermarkets to be using Yoti for age verification at the self-checkout. You want your big classified sites and all of those kind of sites that people use regularly to prove identity or to prove age. They're the ones which we need to keep on working at winning.
Sure. Well, I could even see different festivals or even concerts and stuff like that, or other events being able to save a ton of time by using something like this.
Yeah, I think there's lots of sectors. So I think some people have tried to develop identity solutions for particular sectors, and I kind of see that working a little bit, but I don't think in the end that's what the consumer wants. The consumer wants one identity. They might end up with 2 or 3 on their phone. I suspect if Apple or Google create an identity, people, a reasonable number of people would use it. But I think they also want to have one where they think this is very private. It does what it needs to. But I'm not monetizing all of my data, or only where I'm keen to actually share that information with a site and get a receipt for doing so to make sure, I've got legal proof that I did share my info with the insurance company. But it goes across lots of sectors, whether you're on online dating or online marketplaces, health, financial services, property, tenants proving who they are, landlords proving who they are. Heathrow Airport is somebody who, has looked with us and the airlines, and really, really neat kind of technology that, I can prove who I am to an airline. They can issue a boarding pass onto my Yoti, and then I can share that boarding pass and my biometric template. So that's effectively a kind of, a map of what my facial characteristics and measurements are, but you can't reconstitute my face from it. But effectively, it will allow me to give that to a airport, and then when I turn up on the day of the flight, they can spot me with a camera. I can willingly let them do that, and then they can look and go, well, he's a match for somebody called Robin Toombs, and they've got a boarding pass and they're meant to be flying today, and that's why we're going to open the gate for them. And that's why we're then going to let them on the plane at the boarding gate without doing another check. And the airline industry is going to drive a huge amount of ID adoption over the next few years. They're all now, experimenting with biometric face matching. It means they can move many, many more people
Yeah.
through the airport without doing lots and lots of manual checks along the way.
Well, and it's safer for everybody too, right?
Yeah, in the UK, you'll be amazed, but we lose 1.4 million driving licenses and passports a year in the UK. And it's
Wow.
mainly because there's 65 million of us in the UK. But if you're a young person in the UK, we don't have a national identity card. And
Okay.
therefore, you literally find that 18-year-olds out at pubs and nightclubs
Sure.
have got in their back pocket in the summer their passport. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
crazy.
big old document. So it's sticking out the back.
Yeah.
And some of them have had a few too many to drink.
Sure.
And they leave the nightclub and the passport's on the floor. And some of those passports are handed in and destroyed, and other ones probably go to the wrong places. So it's a crazy, crazy system. And all the young people say to us, I don't want to be taking out my passport or my driving license.
Totally.
I want to basically, the only thing I really keep on me anymore is my phone and my wallet. And actually, a lot of young people now are making payments through their phones. So they want all of this to be on their phone. And I think more and more businesses are hearing the same. So whether it's Yoti or other digital identities, I think the future of ID coming back to what's going on in the sector, digital identity is going to be a big part of what happens over the next 5 to 10 years.
No, I 100% agree with you. But Robin, we're coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get the Yoti app, YOTI, at obviously the Android Play Store and the Apple App Store. But you can also go to yoti.com, YOTI.com, and also Twitter handle @GetYoti.
Perfect, Robin. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks very much for having me on the show, Kevin.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.